The Moton Mailbag is brought to you by the Robert Russo Moton Museum, located in Farmville, Virginia. The Moton Museum is a civil rights museum focusing on the history of Prince Edward County between 1951 and 1964.
Hey there, I'm Leah Brown, the Assistant Director for Education here at the Moton Museum.
I'm Irene, the Intern for Education and Outreach.
And I'm Kanan Townsend, Director of Education and Outreach. And this is a special version of our podcast, Moton Mailbag Live. It's a podcast that we designed especially for Moton Live. Today we will go over questions that are frequently asked, FAQs. In the end, we'll have some time for some this or that, a little bit more fun, so stick around to the end. Y'all ready to get started with the questions?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. So I'll ask the first question. What is your favorite Moton moment?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So we had kindergartners come from Prince Edward, and I love the littles because they're chatty. Just want to tell you all about their life story. Somebody had a new cat, and somebody just got her nails done. It has nothing to do with what we're doing, but just being able to engage with our little visitors. That I'm like, you're still learning so much. Everything's exciting. It's all new. I don't know. It made me all fuzzy, and they're just cute.
Yeah, I'm actually going to hop on the opposite side of that spectrum. My favorite Moton moment is anytime Reverend Williams comes in, just getting to hear from someone who is, that old and has that much insight and really lived through all of what happened. And just every time he comes to visit, he's so much fun to talk to.
Yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite. Favorite in terms of working here. I love working with the little kids who come in. The middle school and high schoolers are okay too, but like the little ones who are just so insightful, and that's very special to me. Working with the older students, you can get a bit more hands-on, a little bit more into the details and the nitty-gritty of the whole thing. The storytellers, working with them certainly kind of on the Irene side of things, who lived the experience and who first-hand accounts. There's no real substitute for that. I guess, let me pick an example that y'all didn't then. I guess when we first can start working with them, which is usually like 7th grade or so, 7th grade U.S. history. It's always great to see the students making the connections from what they learn in kind of 4th grade Virginia studies and moving up through 5th and 6th grade, whatever history, world geography, and whatever courses. And finally, they're like, "Oh man, I'm starting to get this, right?"
Yeah.
And I am noticing connections between our world and this history that we're talking about here.
Yeah, seeing the puzzle pieces fit together.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they're going into civics right after that, or in 7th grade, depending on where they're located. So it works great because then they think about, okay, where's my role in this? How do I apply this? And how do I fix the world that I am a resident of? So, yeah. Great. So I will ask the next question, and this is kind of similar, kind of different, but what is your best tour/visitor experience story and why?
So yeah, I'll take this one first. I haven't really been here for that long, about 6 months or so, but I think it was maybe one Friday or so, I was sitting in the bookstore managing the front desk, and 3 Longwood students came in, and one of them had been there before, and they brought in 2 of their friends who had not been there, and they were talking about, we're looking for something to do. Our friend recommended this place, said they'd already been, and it was really interesting, and they just wanted to come back for more information, to hear more of their story. And, seeing college students come in to engage with the Moton story who, weren't there because they had to for a class or for some other sort of project. They were there just because they were curious about the story and wanted to learn. That was really cool to see.
Yeah, I think for me, it's so hard to pick a best. These best favorite ones are just always just like, I gotta be, and then it's like, oh man, I should have said this one. But one of my favorite tour visitor experiences, we were working with 2nd grade students, and of course, both of you know we've got the strike activity, but for the viewers who might not know, we basically get the students to look at kind of the Moton School Story, but then apply it to the lens of their own situation. So we ask them to identify a problem or an issue in their school and their community, and then devise a plan, a protest to fix that problem. And so we had this 2nd grader from a certain county, and I won't name it because I don't want to identify who the person is, but the student was so kind of inspired by what they learned at Moton. The follow-up for that for us is that that student held a protest on the playground later for more school funding. And so we're just like, second grade, right? Like people, I'm always going to say kids don't get enough credit, but really he kind of thought about the situation and, you know, what they didn't have and what they could have, and was like, yeah, let's go on. I mean, the protest didn't last very long, but but, you know, you had to get back to hopscotch or whatever they were doing, or whatever kids do nowadays. But yeah, it was just, those kind of stories for me are very, very powerful and really indicate the significance of our work.
Yeah, absolutely. So my favorite tour experience, we had a reporter come visit Moton, and one of our docents, Mr. Bob Hamlin, and I toured him through the galleries. And I love Mr. Hamlin. Everybody knows it. And he went to school at Moton, so he's telling us, oh yeah, this is what happened here. This is my favorite spot, like in school. And I'm like, this is my spot in Gallery 3. This is amazing. To just like to see him share his life story with us. It was a good tour. And I'm like, I learned a lot. Anytime I can learn while I'm giving a tour, it's awesome.
It's always intimidating. This isn't one of the questions, but it's always, to me, it's a bit intimidating walking through the exhibit with somebody who was a part of that history. Even for somebody, you know, for me, you know, I was born and raised here, but even just like Joan Johns Cobbs and me walking through the exhibit, I'm just like, okay, we got to make sure every piece of information is right. Every date's got to be correct. Sure. And, you know, and they always say we do a good job, but it's always a bit intimidating because, you know, you look at the black and white photographs and you look at the dates and the time periods where you weren't even a thought in your parents' minds if your parents were even alive for this. And so we think that it's XYZ 100, 200 years ago, but like this year is the 70th anniversary of the student walkout. Like that is not a very long time ago. Like it's a drop in the bucket.
Okay guys, if you could go back in time to the 50s or the 60s, who would you want to speak with in Farmville? Or Prince Edward?
So yeah, I was thinking about this one, and you know, as a college student who left home not too long ago, who's now back, you know, I would really want to talk to the middle and high school students who left Farmville and left Prince Edward County to go up north and out west to go get their education. Sure. You know, I mean, everyone talks about the time when you turn 18, you graduate high school, and then, you know, you leave home, but to leave at a younger age when you had no plans to do that yet and you weren't really sure about what was going to happen, there was no plan set, you just didn't know what was going on. I think that has to be a lot to sort of take in, and the big adjustment of not just leaving your area, but to go to a completely different region of the country and try to adapt while being away from home for the very first time. You know, and to also talk to their parents and, you know, their siblings too, you know. What was it like to have, you know, the older brother, older sister, you know, leave home and sort of have that missing piece of the family?
My answer will be a cop-out answer. I mean, it's clear for me, Barbara Johns or Reverend Griffin. It's hard to pick anybody else, only because both of them, both passed before I was born, so I would have never had the opportunity to meet them anyway. But just to pick their brain, just to talk about their background. I mean, that interview we did with Skip Griffin, so L. Francis Griffin Jr., back in the fall of last year, where he was talking about his father and everything. I mean, I just had never heard. We heard a lot about these people, and so I kind of compare it to, like, you know, working at this museum with this history that is recent. It's kind of like following a YouTuber or something, right? And like you get to learn like about their background, and so it's like you know them, but you don't, right? Because there's that screen separating it. I feel like that's like for me with Barbara and Reverend Griffin, and instead of a screen, like a literal screen, it's like X amount of years, right? I could never have met you, but I really want to. So for me, it's yeah, I gotta go with Reverend Griffin or Barbara Johns, just because I feel like I know them, but I don't, right? And I couldn't. So
yeah, makes sense. I mean, we tell their stories every day. Yeah. It's like, I want to do justice. I want to do right by saying what you would have said. Right. That kind of dynamic. For me, it's Miss Flossie. Flossie Hudson White. I wanted to make sure I got all of her names. White Hudson. There we go. I knew something was gonna. But she had one of the training centers in her home with 50 students. And, you know, schools are closed at this point, and there's 50 children in her house. That's a lot of children.
Mm-hmm.
How did she do it? Like, what did the room look like? How did she structure the room? Like, were they sitting by age, or was it just like, well, this family's here, this family's there?
Mm-hmm.
I want a rundown of how she did it.
Yeah. And the energy in the room
Yes.
must have been on a completely different level.
I got the opportunity to walk through the exhibit with Flossie one time when there was a group of people, like a senior group that came through the museum. And so when we got to that part of the exhibit where there's a picture of her, the younger picture of her, it just was this whole I did not intend to get emotional with this. I'm getting a little emotional talking about it, but like it was just this moment, and it's just like, she's here, there's a picture of her, and she can talk about that experience firsthand. I mean, it's very, very emotional, and it's a powerful story, of course, but I think, again, goes to show, I mean, I think she was 95, 96 when she did pass, but you know, this is not that long ago. These people are still around, a lot of them, and yeah, it's important to celebrate them as much as we can while they're here.
Yeah.
Smell the roses, let them smell the roses.
So what, if anything, has frustrated you in teaching and telling about this story and the history?
Frustrated might be, there's some things that irk me. There are any historical misconceptions can be irksome. Like there's like locations of certain events happening, or certain events happening at all. Sometimes things get just completely fabricated, or like wives' tales or myths that just kind of can creep into stuff, and that you have to kind of talk through it. Frustrated is a very strong word, but I don't like it when people don't tell the truth. That's my most frustrating. Everything related to history. Just tell the truth. Explore the primary documents. Hopefully, I'm not stealing what Leah's going to say, but
Don't worry.
tell the truth. Use primary sources. When people say something, that's what they said. When people do something, that's what they did. And so let's study the aftermath. Let's study the consequences in the context of the situation. But tell the truth and say what happened. And that's a hard thing a lot of times, because history inherently is traumatic. At least from somebody's perspective. If it's not traumatic, then you're probably missing a voice. But for me, it's just about telling the truth. But I'm very grateful to work at a place where we tell the objective. The exhibit is based in a very objective way. You leave with forming your own opinion. You know, you might like some of the people you saw, you might not like some of the people you saw. But here's what happened. You kind of do with that information what you will.
I think for me, like one of the most frustrating things where it's like, okay, how can I tell you this story and not traumatize you if you're little?
Yeah.
Or if you're a high schooler, like, all right, you're old enough to handle some stuff. But by basing it in those primary sources, like this person said this, that's what they said. You didn't say it. You didn't make them say it. This is what they said. This is how they felt, how they believed. It's not your fault. Like to deal with the concept of, well, are they a good person or are they a bad person? They're a person. People are messy. We just let the sources speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because you see students have like moments where like, well, what am I supposed to do with this information now? Like you sit with it. Be uncomfortable. Be comfortable being uncomfortable, because history is uncomfortable. Actual history. It's not the feel goods. But like with this story, as a reader, constantly, I don't know, someone not being able to read, that stresses me out, especially because it's a life skill. You need to survive.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Yeah,
Stressful.
We say all the time, I mean, humans are three-dimensional. And you know, the one commonality that all humans have is that we are imperfect creatures, right? And sometimes we make bad decisions, and decisions and actions often have consequences. Those can be good consequences, those could be bad consequences. It just kind of depends on the situation. And again, back to that perspective piece, but I think our work is very important to show you don't have to be perfect to have good impact on the world. You don't have to be awful to have a bad impact on the world, right? It's very nuanced, it's a balance, people make choices, choices have consequences, and we're three-dimensional beings. So don't try to sum up one action for an entire person's life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which gallery is your favorite?
So Gallery 3 is my favorite. No surprise there. Talking about Charles Hampton Houston and his role in being the man that killed Jim Crow. I'm like, oh, that's a good title. That's something. And then you turn around the corner, and then there's Earl and the gang, as I call them, the Supreme Court justices that decided the Brown v. Board case. It's like, oh, okay. A lot happens in Gallery 3. Yep. And then whenever I'm giving a tour, I make a point to stop students to look at the faces of the plaintiffs of the Virginia case. Like, these are the people that were impacted. It's not just, the title. Yeah. Like, they're human beings. Yeah.
Let me add an asterisk real quick.
Yeah.
The Moton Museum is separated into 6 galleries in case you've never been. The first is our auditorium, and then 2 through 5 are old classroom spaces, and each one just kind of has a different theme and a different section of the history that they talk about. And Lee is referring to Gallery 3, and we'll, depending on which ones me and Irene pick, we'll be having different parts of it. But just to clarify that for anybody who might not be familiar with the Moton.
Also come visit.
Yeah, always a good plug.
So I was going to also say Gallery 3, but for a slightly different reason. So, I have a pretty big interest in the law, and, I'm studying political science at school. So, when I walk through Gallery 3, I sort of think about the different legal arguments and, moral arguments that were also paired with the legality issue. And, and how did these lawyers come together to decide, we're going to take on this big issue and we're going to fight it? And, the different constitutional arguments, from the Virginia Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, and taking on this beast of segregation and, trying to dismantle it from the inside and the outside, and just the way the legal battle worked its way through the court, from Davis v. Prince Edward County, and then, the other 4 court cases that all came together as Brown. I just think it's so interesting looking through the long legal process that took years.
It's fascinating. Out of Virginia, and this is where you might have to give me some grace with the numbers, but there's something like 10, 11 Supreme Court cases out of Virginia in a 20, 25-year span. That's just not something that happened in a lot of places. Yeah. Virginia was very much a legal-driven state with regards to civil rights, and kind of after Reconstruction. There's a ton of cases that were out of Virginia, or Virginia was involved in. Virginia becomes really a litmus test in a lot of ways for a lot of these challenges to segregation and Jim Crow and things of that nature. So, and I'm going to take this to do one of my mini soapboxes. Virginia deserves more credit for this specific era. Of course, we go back to Jamestown and the founders and stuff, that when we get that credit, but civil rights, we don't talk about Virginia. Yeah. Not really, I think that's something that certainly needs to change, because Virginia has a huge role, I think, in the...
Yeah, there's a lot more to it.
And NAACP in Virginia, was one of the largest and the most active chapters in the country. There's just so much. I'll get off my soapbox now, but I wanted to always put that plug.
Because now I want to keep going in that vein. Why do you think Virginia's not talked about? I know what my theory is.
I know my theory, but I think we'll keep working on it. I do think through Moton kind of being more recognized, through the U.S. Civil Rights Trail, and amongst other things. And Barbara John, certainly, her profile has risen. People are starting to be like, this is 51, right? This is before Rosa, before Malcolm, before Martin, before Selma, before Montgomery, before the Little Rock Nine. These students are protesting here without much example to go from, right? You don't have those mass demonstrations to look at and be like, I can do that. This is very novel for them in 51. So I think people are starting to see the importance of that and what that meant for the movement that would transpire after the walkout of 1951. I think the more stuff we're doing and the work we're doing, the higher the platform and stuff becomes for Moton and the school story. And at least in Virginia, we're going to do a better job talking about Virginia civil rights history, but hopefully it'll spread and spread and spread.
Well, with the new SOL, that adding this history into the education system. You know, it's the first step.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Now, all my tangents aside, my favorite gallery probably depends on the day, the year. So this is my 5th year at Moton, if I'm correct, I think, at least in this capacity. And if you had asked me when I first started, I probably would have been like, oh, gallery 2, you know, because that's just the most confident gallery that I was in. Mm-hmm. Now, and what would have probably been not my, I don't have a least favorite, but my least comfortable gallery. Sure. Gallery 4 is probably my favorite right now. Massive Resistance, I mean, that is was super intimidating to me at first, but Massive Resistance is just it was a fascinating time. And the court fights, kind of like what Reem was talking about in Gallery 3, and the use of law and political mechanisms was just absolutely fascinating. And it some awful things happen, but it's just interesting to look and I'm like, wow, like they were able to do X, Y, Z in this way and get away with it, right? But then also looking at from the other side, which is something that I had not done initially, but looking at the work, not just from the Virginia politicians, but from what was the NAACP doing? Because it's kind of that gap, 55 to 59, where we don't talk, you know, you get the Brown 2 in 55, and then you really don't, you know, there's the stuff that happens in between that you don't talk as much about, at least in my experience. But Gallery 4, I mean, right now, I mean, that's my go-to, and I'm enjoying diving into that history a little bit more.
It's a beast.
Yep.
It's a beast.
It is a lot. It's a massive undertaking. I don't know who's asking this question, but Leah should answer it first because I think she'll have the best answer. So if you want to ask it, that's cool.
Sure. So Leah, what is the best primary source to engage with the Moton School Story?
Okay, so what I love oral histories, so being able to speak or listen to the person tell their own story. Their voice is powerful. Like, why read something when I could just call you up, be like, hey, I have a question. Right. What happened here? What do you remember? Kind of thing. So our Moton interview series has a couple first-person perspectives of desegregation. Like Miss Sylvia Hathaway was one of the first people to integrate New Kent High School. And like chatting with her, I'm like, give me all your secrets. Tell me everything. Because I want to keep it like as a historian for posterity, but also just chat me up. Just tell me what's going on.
Yeah. Going back to the idea that a person is a person, you know, getting down to the humanity of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it's a privilege to be able to say like, oh, I talked to so-and-so today. Be jealous. Because being able to hear the person tell me what they know versus me reading about it and just trying to put the puzzle pieces together versus being given the puzzle.
Right. Yeah, I often feel like we can get lost in the statistics. I mean, the statistics and numbers are very, very important, but kind of like what Irene was saying earlier, I mean, if you use those numbers, it's hard to find the humanity when you're just looking at numbers and dates. Like if you can see, so Leah mentioned oral histories, I mean, we got some great photos in the exhibit and in our kind of archival area that just really go to show a lot of, I mean, picture says 1,000 words, right? Use the old metaphor, euphemism, whatever the correct terminology for that is. But there's some great pictures and very effective, especially it's kind of our go-to for Virginia Studies, 4th and 5th grade, depending on where you're at. But it's our go-to to be like, look, and go back into the younger student pedagogy, but like, they might not be able to understand the intricacies of Jim Crow, of massive resistance, but they can tell you what's fair and what's not fair, right? They can tell you when people are being treated bad or being treated good. And so by looking at those photos, they begin to be like, okay, so African Americans, you know, and maybe indigenous, maybe native, maybe Latinx, Hispanic folks, they didn't get treated the same way the white people got treated. And so then they get they get the itch, right? And they start to be like, why was that? And they get curious. And so then they go out and seek answers to these questions. So, I mean, any primary source you can use, but I'm very partial to photographs and images because I'm a very visual learner. But I'm trying to get better into the text and stuff as well. So, you know, it's good. Unless you, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my favorite place to go to for primary sources, I'll say. The Library of Virginia has a lot of great primary sources, and so does the Library of Congress, both of which are free, you know, and completely underrated, I'll say. You know, I think a lot of people look at these things as these huge institutions that are just seemingly endless, but it's a great first place to start, so.
On that same vein, NAMAC, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, has amazing primary sources, is amazing information, archives, photos,
Resources.
programs that are free because it's through the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. This month, which is, we're recording this in Black History Month, they've had a huge array, maybe I should have said that. Anyways, we can cut that later. NAMAC has a huge amount of resources and things that, and programs that again are free because of the Smithsonian. So definitely go out and utilize those resources and ours as well. Oof, that was a rough. Okay, where are we at now? New surprising history knowledge. Okay, is there something like new or surprising about history that you all have learned recently? And I'm going to take the new as like new to you. Something that is interesting, something that you're like, I didn't know that was that way, that maybe stands out?
So I came to Moton to intern in September, and you know, up until then I had a pretty good idea about what the story was and how things happened, and you know, being in the building, sort of going through the galleries and seeing like what did the space actually look like. But it wasn't about until a couple months in that I finally realized that there was no cafeteria, you know, and that, you know, something that, you know, I thought was so simple and, you know, I guess sort of took for granted, you know, being able to have that hot lunch at school, like that was not a thing at Moton. These Moton students didn't have that opportunity, and just sort of, you know, it was new knowledge in a sense that, you know, it was the first time I'd sort of realized that, and that was
new to you.
Yeah, you know, it sort of made the story more real, and you know, it brought a whole different aspect to it, you know, in terms of these young students going through the day.
What you Lee?
So I'm reading Cicely Tyson's biography and learning American history through her life, because she was born in 24, I believe. And it's like, okay, here we go, 20th century, tell me what happened. I've been shocked. I've been shook. Like, you know, she married Miles Davis. Like, they were married. And I was like, what? When did this happen?
I was not aware of that.
See? And it's just like, okay. So American history through the lens of an entertainer. I just read the chapter on 1968. Yeah. And it's like, okay, when she's going to find out what's going to happen. And like, Miles Davis gets off the phone and is like, he's dead. Like, he's been shot. And she's like, stop playing. Stop playing. And then, of course, and she just like falls to the floor screaming, because that's what grief looks like. So I had to go for a walk after that, because it's sobering.
Right.
Like, I know her as this amazing actress. She's a person as well. So I got a lot of feelings about that.
Yeah. To me, some new stuff, new to me. I've been really researching Israel Hill on the Appomattox. So that is the title of the book. But there's an Israel Hill community here in Prince Edward County, free blacks, pre-mass emancipation after the Civil War ended in '65. And it's just fascinating to know that there was a pretty sizable population of free men, you know, men and women and children, but free black people in Prince Edward County prior to the Civil War, going back to, I think the earliest I saw was 1797, and they were free, you know, so a pretty sizable population. I was like, wow, this is very interesting. And they, you know, they were suing in the courts and winning, and they were employed, and they were entrepreneurs. I mean, it's just fascinating, the stuff that you don't either learn about, or you're just unaware of, or you know, take for granted. You know, local history. I mean,
being in the area.
It's rich. Like, the amount of people who live here and don't come to Moton, it's probably more than folks would think. you know. And but so I just
Yeah.
I'm just building the whole statue of soapboxes here, and I'm gonna stand on top of all of them by the end.
As you should.
But like, just learn the local stuff. Go. If you have a museum, go to it. If you have elderly people in your community, talk to them, especially if they've lived there for a long time. Like, there's just so much history.
Yeah.
So much history. Okay, so this next one will be kind of especially good if any educators are watching, but we get these questions quite, well, maybe not the first, but quite often. So it's just I'll just go ahead and tackle these ones, and then we can get into the next one. But the first one is, who is Barbara Johns? Barbara Johns was a 16-year-old junior at Moton High School who in 1951, April 23rd, 70 years ago this year, led a student walkout along with her committee. And then the entire 400-something student body of Moton walked out of Moton High School protesting for a new school building because the county was not listening to Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. And that led to eventually the Brown versus Board of Education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Barbara Johns was the conspirator of the strike, but she really inspired a true collective act that was able to effectively change the course of U.S. history. So that, in short, is who was Barbara Johns. Reverend L. Francis Griffin was a pastor here in Prince Edward County during that time period of First Baptist Church, which was easily the biggest church in Farmville at the time, easily. It was a Black Baptist church, and he very much was not the traditional pastor, right? Now, and I'm going to quote Reverend Williams, since you brought him up earlier. You know, Reverend Williams would say something to the effect of normal or typical pastors, your weddings, you bury the dead, preach on Sundays, right? But Reverend Griffin was known as the fighting preacher, and he challenged his congregation. He stepped up in the community. He wanted to limit social injustice. He wanted to advocate for rights of African Americans, and he did, you know, and much to kind of social capital loss, and you know, certainly there were threats, and you know, but he was our shepherd here in Farmville. He was, I hate putting it like this, but the Martin Luther King of Farmville, basically. He was very involved in NAACP. He eventually would be the state president of the NAACP for Virginia. You know, so a really, really amazing fighter for liberty and justice for all people, really. Yeah. Third one is, who is Robert Russo Moton? Robert Russo Moton was Booker T. Washington's number 2 at Tuskegee and would eventually succeed, right? I don't know. It's one of those words. He would eventually, he eventually would take over for Booker T. Washington at Tuskegee, and eventually would go off to be involved with Hampton and Hampton Normal Institute, I believe was what it was when he was there, but eventually Hampton University today. It's also where he's buried. He was a very big advocate for, buried in Hampton, a very big advocate for African Americans taking up trade skills, similar to Booker T, so it kind of makes sense in that kind of ideology. He advised something like 6 U.S. presidents. I mean, really, really awesome guy. When they were naming Moton High School, they wanted to name it after a prominent Prince Edwardian. And so Moton is from Prince Edward, although I believe technically he might have been born in Amelia, but like 2 days later, in his old home is in Prince Edward, so he's Prince Edwardian. We're going to claim him. If anybody from Amelia is watching, I'm sorry. But Robert Russo Moton was that person, a very prominent African American who a lot of people just don't know about, right? A lot of people just don't know.
I didn't learn who he was until I came here. You know, it took me some time to sort of, because you always hear the name Moton in Farmville growing up here. But, you know, it took me till about, you know, a little over 19 and a half years old until I finally realized who he was, so.
He does definitely not get talked about a lot. I think that too is improving, but he's certainly more of a lesser known. But we're working to improve that as well through our work.
I'll ask it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Why is the Moton School Story important?
You first, me first?
Well, so, you know, I'll sort of take this one thinking about, I mean, I like to think of myself as a youth advocate, you know, just thinking about, I think there are a lot of important lessons that not just the youth, but really anyone at any age can learn from the Moton School Story. You know, the story of persistence, the story of resilience, of, you know, being pushed against for years and years and years and being told, no, you shouldn't do that, or it's not possible. And then, you know, standing back up and saying, I'm going to do this. This is what's right. This is what I believe in. And Barbara John, she said it felt like reaching for the moon. And, things may feel far away, but I think the Moton School Story can really teach anyone, no matter what stage of the life that they're at, that even though things feel far away, if you have persistence and resilience and the kind of community engagement, we were talking about this earlier, the way the community came together during this time in Prince Edward County and, stood behind each other and everyone had each other's backs. Yeah. I just think there's a lot of important lessons that you can apply to all aspects of life at all stages of life.
Yeah, I can see the influence we've had over Irene for these past 6-7 months because she basically just took most of the words I was going to say, but let me put a spin and try to think of a different way to put it so it's not being redundant. I think for all the reasons aforementioned, in addition, I think a good, important lesson to take from, and using the Moton School Story as an example, is I'm going to blow it up to Black history in general. And it's very easy to look at the Black experience, to look at Black history, and to only pull out trauma, right? It's very, very easy and victimization, because that is a lot of Black history and Black experience. However, if you only look at it from that angle, you completely miss that resiliency, right? You miss that fighting spirit, you miss that energy, you miss that passion, you miss that part, the aspect of their faith. You miss that the fact that every time something happens, there's somebody fighting back, right? Slavery, abolition, and then eventually we get abolition, Jim Crow, prison industrial. There's always somebody, something fighting, from NAACP to Black Lives Matter, whatever it is. Not talking about those organizations specifically, but there's always some sort of advocacy, some sort of fight back. There's never just passive letting this stuff happen. There's always active players. And so I always say this, like when we're going through the exhibit, it's like, look, all the stuff that happened to these people was wrong, was bad, but they didn't just sit there and take it, right? They were doing stuff about it. They were using the courts. They were writing letters. They were protesting. Like, there was always a fight back. So please don't just look at them as victimized people and this is just traumatic history, but look at this as a story of these people were able to fight back and they had agency, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sure we didn't leave much for Leah to say about
No, we're good. Because, to me, it's important because it's a local story, a community story with national implications. Yeah. National implications. Like, I'll never forget the day I learned Bromley Board was 5 locations. I was appalled. I didn't know. How many schools have I been to? And I did not know. It was never taught. Probably because I didn't take the right classes, but it was never taught explicitly. There's 5 different locations. Right. And then for it to be here, I'm a Virginian, did not know this story. So I have a personal passion to tell it. Yeah. Because it's life changing. Yeah. Also, Barbara Johns was 16.
Right.
It's a lot. That is
16.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just these were children, and they were going against institutions that did not care about their humanity, and yet and still.
It's okay. So when we often dream big, right? And we want to make big institutional change, but institutional change doesn't happen overnight, right? Yep. And so Barbara wasn't trying to change the world. She wasn't trying to change the country or even the state. She was trying to fix a local problem. Yeah. And it just so happened that this local problem, it really highlighted the issues of the entire state and of the entire country. So eventually it transpires forward. But what I try to tell young people, I'm like, look, start local first, right? Fix the pothole on your road. Trim the branches on the trees that are, protruding into the highway or whatever. Get more school funding, because if what you're doing is important and if it's revolutionary, or even if it's not, even if it's just a good way of doing things, other people will take note. That's what it's a snowball effect. It doesn't say that has to happen, but it could. But you can't, my goal is to solve systemic racism. Well, if there was an easy solution, if there was a solution to that was just ready there, it could or would happen, right? But if you, maybe just start with small acts, start with leading by example and trying to be open-minded and checking your implicit biases. That's a good way on a small scale to start it, but you never know, by you being open-minded, by you being kind to all people, what example you're setting for other people, and that effect really will spread. But again, Barbara and these students, it was a local issue. It just so happened to kind of fit into a story that needed to be shared and told, and eventually leading the Brown versus Board of Education.
Well, so the idea that there is no such thing as small change, for someone somewhere,
Absolutely.
This small change, for them it's a big change. It means something so much more, and doing that on the local level, you can really see that, how for you a small change, a small task can be the world to someone else.
Absolutely. Like, my word for the year is accountability, being accountable, and then like having kindness as well. Because sometimes you need to be kind to yourself and leave a situation.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Other times it's like, okay, this is why this hurt me.
Right.
You're gonna keep doing it? Okay, you've shown me who you are. I'm gonna move along.
Right.
But in this context of like that history, time and time again, laws were put in place to harm people and like take away their citizenship. Time and time again, like, oh, okay, we're gonna fight this.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's what we have, and moving forward with it.
Absolutely.
I mean, just to get Moton built itself, Miss Martha Forrester and the Council of Colored Women lobbying for the school to be built. Like, our children need this. Make it happen. We're paying their taxes. Make it so. There's so many stories.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I can already see this next answer taking a significant chunk of time. So I'll ask it, and then I'll give my 2 cents, and then we can kind of see where it goes. Because I think we're basically just talking about this morning, really.
Yeah.
So why did this history occur in Prince Edward County is in short the question. And there's a lot of answers for that. There are a lot of answers for that. But what I've been saying recently is that it was a very unique set of circumstances that caused this to happen. So because Israel, that community, and this is not meant to be seen as a linear direct cause and effect, cause and effect, but more so a kind of not jumping to conclusion, but drawing a conclusion from a lot of information and historical interpretation. So why this happened in Prince Edward County? Because Israel Hill happened, which meant we had free blacks, which meant they had time to build up wealth of some sort. Not nearly as what the white people had, but there was a significant black middle class that we can tie directly back to, the Israelites and the free blacks, prior to and post the Civil War. And so they build up, they have land, have businesses, entrepreneurship. They are pretty much independent, not reliant upon white people to make their ends meet. So we have a significant population of black middle class people in Prince Edward County. So what that means is that while many other counties are advocating for trade schools and such, Prince Edward County was advocating for high schools, for high school grades, because eventually they wanted to talk about college. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with trade schools and college, but it meant that they were going to advocate for these high school grades. So they get high school grades in the mid-late 20s, and then the high school gets built in 1939. This is kind of ahead of a lot of other counties surrounding us and a lot of parts of the state in terms of education, right? Education was at the core of Prince Edward County from the beginning. Right, we knew that this was the key, the silver bullet, that great equalizer, to give all the great educational metaphors that I can think of. We knew that this was the key, and it's a strain that runs through this whole story. So I think this happened in Prince Edward County because of all that stuff, because of the black middle class, because of their advocacy, and then because of this constant also theme of not settling for less. I know my worth, I know my value, I know my rights, and I'm going to communicate that to you through any means necessary, including a lawsuit, which is what happens a lot during the 50s and 60s, certainly. So, y'all want to weigh in on that one? I just wanted to kind of get my thoughts out.
Having resources means you have options.
Right.
Having options is a powerful thing. So it helps as a mechanism to fight for injustices because you have options. Right. And just like wealth is important because it's a tool, and you need tools to get stuff done.
Yeah, and sort of think about, how they built up from the free black community and Israel Hill, and then how they all sort of just continued to work their way up. The grit, you know, and you talking about knowing their worth and saying, this is my worth and I'm not going to settle for less. The grit that they built up, you know, going through from court case to court case and from personal experience to personal experience that they passed down through the community.
Absolutely.
And how that grit, and you continue to see that grit with Barbara Johns and the strike committee, and, you know, after the schools closed, you know, they continued with that grit and that persistence and resilience.
Absolutely.
You know, when you mentioned court cases, that had been happening for centuries at that point.
I mean, really.
Just moving forward, it's like, this is our tool. This is what
Mhm.
we're going to use to move forward. Yeah, absolutely.
The next question is also has the potential to.
We'll see.
So how about Leah? You want to start with that one?
Yeah. All right, so you guys, what were the long-term implications of the school closing?
I am one to say that most of the problems here in the county today goes back to the school closings era, and that's economic, that's educational, that's pretty much every aspect. We can somehow, when you go back and learn, like, why do these problems exist? And we go back, oh, school closings, right? Like, not all the problems, but I think almost every problem here in Prince Edward County today, we can somehow connect back to the school closings. Further, you know, you have residents of Prince Edward County who, you know, adult illiteracy rate is extremely high here, right? The poverty rate here in Prince Edward County, probably something like, and you might update, the statistics might have been updated by now, but like about 19%, which is almost a fifth of the county, which is not great. But then you look at what's known as an ALICE condition, asset limited, income constrained, but employed, which is you're above the poverty line, but still not doing excellent. You're living paycheck to paycheck at best, treading water at worst, right? And that's another, probably about 30% or so. So about half the county is either in poverty or right above it, right? So what does that come from? Well, it comes from that time period, right? And so we're still working on trying to fix these issues from the school closings, but it's a difficult thing to do because we don't even, I mean, it's just first, it's traumatic to talk about, right? Like, we don't know all the damage that has been caused, and it's just hard. It's just hard, but we have to sit in it, and like Leah said earlier, we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because we're never going to have any significant progress. Like, I'm only one generation removed from this, right? My dad, and I tell the story all the time where I'd be so annoyed in the summer times because, you know, my friends are outside, golf carts or four-wheelers or whatever, and my dad's making math problems for me to do at home. I'm just like, Dad, really? I mean, multiplication, I'm good at this. And so he'd go to division. But looking back, I very much appreciate that, and it made sense why, you know, by the time I got to high school, math was my strongest subject. You know, he knew about that summer slide that happened because he himself was out of school for a 5-year period, 4 or 5-year period. So, yeah. Those are the long-term some of the long-term implications of school closings. Anything to add on y'all's part?
Well, you know, I think the uncomfortability that a lot of people have, because it is a sensitive subject for a lot of people in this community, you know, so many just decided, like, it's sensitive, it's uncomfortable, you know, so we'll set it aside, we'll say, all right, it's in the past, you know, and the long term, because of it was so traumatic, and because of that, a lot of people still are uncomfortable talking about it, and it is still a very sensitive subject for many people on both sides, you know.
Absolutely.
There's a side of people, they don't want to re-traumatize, they don't want to say the wrong thing, you know, and because I think a lot of people are so uncomfortable, you know, because of how traumatic it was.
I said the trauma or the traumatic side, and then there's like the guilt or the shame, I feel like, side. So like whatever reason, we're at an impasse because we're not talking about it. And so, and I understand why both perspectives wouldn't want to talk about it, but it's like something has to happen for us to get some forward movement. And I think that has improved over the years, but it's difficult. It's difficult.
I mean, just the loss of infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
And then always for me, like, for the personal perspectives, I was chatting with one of the teachers, and his uncle can't read because he was, like, out of school. And it's like, well, that's not great at all. And in our Moton magazines, there's one where it was a white woman. She was part of the Prince Edward Academy, but as a 4th grader, she was teaching 2nd graders. And I'm like, wow, this hurt everybody. Every single person here was harmed by this.
Even the folks who went to the academy, I mean, everybody was harmed in some way, shape, or form from this.
Thinking about that loss of infrastructure that you were just talking about, all the people who fled the county because their kids needed an education, and you know, parents saw like, I need to provide this for my child, and you know, so they left. And thinking about all the things that we lost and could have had, you know, had this not happened, had we been able to sort of get to the end, you know. Yeah.
All right, is it time to transition?
Yes, it is.
Something a little lighter.
We have, very emotional, very heavy.
Yeah.
But
important
this
to talk about.
Absolutely
crucial to talk
For
about.
sure.
So this is the part where if you are not really into the more fun stuff, you're welcome to tune out and come back in for the next kind of section of the program. But we're going to do a little bit of this or that. So it's literally 2 options you pick, and we'll debate for a couple of seconds or defend our stance, and then we'll go to the next one. So first one is dogs or cats. Which do you prefer, or which are better?
I am preferential to dogs. I'm a dog person. I love my dog. My dog is my child. He is the light of my life.
Oh my God.
I adore him with my entire being whenever I leave, you know, and I go back to school.
Wait, I didn't know you even had it.
What kind of dog
did you know that you had a
have?
dog? I didn't know you had a dog.
Yeah, I have a golden doodle. You didn't know?
No, I've never seen any picture of him.
Wait,
How is he the light of your life?
Well, my mom and I, we got him in the summer of 2017, and we got him when he was a puppy. And, you know, that was when one of my older brothers, last older brother, he finally went off to college, so it's just me and Mom at home. So Mom and I raised him as a puppy, you know, so we spent all that time with him, and, you know, his cage was in my room, so he slept with me, and, you know, to this day, him and I together like this all the time. So yeah, I'm very preferential to dogs. I had a cat, you know, she's an outside cat. She's sweet, love her, but I'm a dog person through and through. Dog is a man's best friend. I will stand by that statement.
Cats, don't at me.
Cats, because they don't like people.
I knew I was going to get outvoted, but
How did
cat person?
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need more explanation
We might both get
from the two
canceled.
of you.
We might both get canceled.
So, look, okay, let's be clear.
Not cancel culture.
I enjoy dogs. Dogs are like having a child. That's too much work. A cat,
Fair enough.
fed, water,
Yeah.
maybe a snuggle or two, and we mutually ignore each other when we're in the same house. It's perfect.
They come to you and they need
Exactly.
something, and if they don't, then they do
You
their
know
own
where
thing.
I am in the house.
Yeah.
Play less work.
To me, I'm just not big on either, but if I had to pick one, I guess cats, because they're like, I don't know.
Dogs are
independent.
needy. Yeah.
I did not expect that to go this way. All right.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
I totally expected to be outvoted.
Okay.
All right, this next one's different. Netflix or YouTube?
It depends on the situation. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm like just having a lunch break and I want something like easy to, you know, just like not focus on and have like going through, pull up a YouTube video, something funny, maybe a Vine compilation, you know, and I will admit that I am now watching Grey's Anatomy for the third or fourth time through on Netflix. You know, it's easy, it's reliable, except when they take something off and then I get upset. You know,
As you
but
should.
it's very situational. You know, how much am I focusing on it?
Yes. For sure. Because, like,
You also Netflix? Or you just agreeing? Oh.
it depends. Like, if I need
No,
a
you gotta
song,
pick. You gotta
or
pick.
YouTube then. If I need a song.
Oh.
Because, I mean, Netflix, I don't have time. If I have time to invest, like, I'm going
Okay.
to purposely watch this show for an
Yeah.
hour. as in actively watch it versus having it all in the background. Like I could have Grey's in the background, no problem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I'm more of a music person than a TV person.
Okay.
I was born in the wrong time. I should have either been
Oh my
born
gosh.
in
Okay, man.
1970 or 2001 because I'm YouTube all day. I'm all into the Twitch, and I like watching the Fork Knife and all the other cool games that they be streaming online. I think it's great. YouTube. I could only have YouTube and I'd be fine. I follow enough YouTubers. I could have content that will last me for hours and hours and hours. Netflix, I mean, it's fine. But like, I got Disney Plus now, so do I really need Netflix anymore?
There you go.
Oof, there's
Disney
the one.
Plus.
That's
That wasn't
the
the
question.
that wasn't the question on the prompt, but you know,
Oof.
I'm at YouTube all day.
Oh,
Yeah.
YouTube all day.
2-0.
I have a
Y'all are.
actually don't know what this next one's gonna go.
Oh,
Phone call or text?
text. Don't
Yeah.
call me.
It depends on who I'm talking to.
I mean,
My
fair.
mom, I love her. I love my mom.
Oh God.
But sometimes her text messages just don't make sense, and she does not always respond to them in a timely
She's
manner.
gonna see this.
And that's why I'm telling my mom that I
Okay.
love her.
Okay,
I
there we
love you,
go.
Mom. But she's not always great with making sense and responding in a well-timed manner. And so I think in that I have to, just for the simplicity of being able to communicate with my mom, I will have to go phone call. For that reason only.
I respect that though. I respect that.
Yeah.
Because if you're not a good texter, it's like, what did you say to me? I will then call. Like, hello,
Yep.
clarification, please.
Yep.
Yeah, but no, text me. I love an email.
My mom will answer her email faster than she will pick up a phone call or answer a
There you go.
text. And that when I was younger and I really needed to get a hold of, I sent her an email.
Smart.
You
Show your
know-
audience.
I am like vegetation at a baseball park, firmly on the fence, because I don't know. Y'all both welcome for
Hold
that.
up, hold
I have no idea. I guess I'll go text. I think about,
Quick and easy.
you can ignore it. Not that I'd be ignoring people. Oh gosh, people are gonna watch this.
They're like, so that's
You
why
can
Kanan
like
didn't
answer
respond.
slowly, like. But in the situations that you're sending me a novel, I'm like, all right, just call me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just call me. I don't feel like if I have to scroll more than twice, just call me. It's not unless it's an emergency and you have to do it. But outside of that context, I don't think anything that's just only typed with thumbs is really like, just call me. Just call me. Just call me, please. But text overall,
Yeah.
51% to 49%.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fair. All right, I want to ask you guys
Go,
this
yeah.
one.
Go.
From the younger generation, Twitter or TikTok?
Twitter. Obviously.
Kanan, we know how you feel about TikTok.
That's going to be good. All right, go
It's
ahead.
barely. I mean, it's Twitter, but barely. I mean, I'd really like to pick neither, because I'm an old soul and I am on the Facebook still. But
The Facebook.
Uh-huh.
but
That's his proper title.
TikTok, Twitter,
Twitter.
because you can get the same type of content on Twitter, you know, just in a different form factor.
And I will say Twitter too. It took me a long time.
Really?
Yeah, it took me a long time
I'm
to get
surprised.
on the TikTok game. You know, I was babysitting a couple young middle school, older elementary school girls over the summer, and they're like, I mean, get TikTok. And I was like, yeah. The sarcasm that you find on Twitter, unbeatable.
Yes.
Unbeatable. And for that, it just, Twitter communities, iconic.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. All right, guys. Cake or pie?
See, I really just think cake. I feel like any type of cake you can have with ice cream.
Fair.
You can't have every type of pie with ice cream.
Well, you could if you didn't like yourself. but-
Chicken pot pie with ice cream?
Okay, well, okay.
We're thinking
We're thinking sweet pie, not savory pie. Chicken pot pie and ice cream. I did not need to think about that. That's
I mean, not at the same time.
But even still, I wouldn't have a blueberry pie with ice cream. I feel like that's just not the vibe.
No, with lemon ice cream?
No.
Is there savory cake?
Bread.
It could be cake.
I mean, is there
cake,
savory?
cake donut? Is that cake?
Would gingerbread be a savory cake?
Oh.
Cake though?
Or is it?
Still bread. What's the
It depends how you
difference?
make it.
What's the difference between bread and cake?
I mean, because
Or
there's
could it
like
be a
gingerbread
cookie?
cookies.
Yeah.
Then there's like grandma's pan of gingerbread that's on the stove. So I don't know.
I'm going pie only because of grandma's sweet potato pie. But
Yes.
if I could pick neither, I'd pick neither.
Huh, okay.
And I'm
Potato pie.
probably gonna. Unpopular opinions is what we
fair.
should have called this because
Yeah.
I'm clearly.
I mean, because what other kind of dessert would there be? Like
Cookies, ice cream.
cookie? Yeah, ice cream, I guess. But you don't like ice cream either.
I
do
don't
you?
like
See,
ice
there you
Mm.
go. All right, to the next.
Which is worse, laundry or dishes?
Laundry.
Dishes.
Ooh, that was so fast.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wait, so what's your laundry process? Do you have a process?
Yeah. So when I finally run out of clothes,
Stop this.
Oh
Then-
no, please! Oh please, please,
when I
please.
will go to laundry
Oh please!
at the very last minute, you know, take my laundry basket downstairs
Oh, no.
and put it in the wash and then the dryer, and then I might leave it down there for a day and pull clothes out of the dryer as I need them, and then finally bring it
So the way-
upstairs and let it sit in the basket in my room for a day or two and continue to pull clothes out, and then it's halfway empty, and then I finally fold it and put it away. It's just, I think I would so much rather do dishes. It's just quicker, one-step process. Maybe that's my youth.
That stressed me out so much. I wish I know. So
Go ahead, go ahead.
wash, dry, fold, put away. It'll take you 10 minutes max. You're not stressed about it. Nothing's wrinkled.
There are a few things more cathartic for me than folding laundry. A lot of people hate it, but I
That's how
enjoy
I
it.
feel about
It's very
dishes.
like rudimentary. But
Playing
like,
with the water and soap, oh yeah.
because then your hands get all pruny and stuff.
Yes, put on
and, like,
moisturizer.
It's just the worst. Like I used to wear those like yellow like
No.
Dexter's Laboratory mom gloves when I used to do dishes because I hated touching the water
Okay.
and have all the like chunks of food and stuff. It was the
You
worst.
don't rinse the plates off?
Yeah.
Wait, what do you mean?
Like before you rinse them off before you wash.
If a kid is doing dishes, people are not paying that close. They're just like, oh, throw it in the sink. I don't gotta wash it. It's the worst. I hated doing dishes.
Yeah.
If I ever go somewhere with that,
Yeah.
well, never. I'm not gonna say that. I enjoy my dishwasher, and that gets used.
Yes.
And
Yes.
For
if
sure.
I had never had to wash a dish again,
Fair.
it'd be too soon.
You should still rinse your dishes before you put them in the
You don't
dishwasher.
have to. They
But
make
you
the strong ones now.
But it's
You need to use better detergent if you're still rinsing these
Wait, what do
dishes.
you use?
Just like the I don't know.
you just take dry
brand
dish
Send me a picture. Like,
Yeah, I mean, well, they be in the commercials would be like, you don't need to rinse it anymore. I'm like,
just because
"What?
they say
Don't rinse
that
it out."
doesn't mean
My
you,
dishes be clean. That's all I'm saying. They be clean.
all right.
And if the stuff, and there's this food on it, like,
No,
then
no.
take a sponge and just wipe it off.
Well, yeah, you don't do any kind of rinsing.
No,
Just little.
no. Load
No, you don't know.
it, set it and forget it.
Okay. All right.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, man. All right, two more real quick. Car or truck?
Car.
SUV.
Well, there you go.
Truck side,
Yeah.
people get mad at me when I call SUVs trucks. But I'm like, it's basically a truck.
It's like
Yeah.
the same engine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
For what I drive a hybrid.
same.
Good gas.
Mhm.
Gets me where I need to go. I can fit everything that I need to take with me to school in there, and
And I feel like my CRV is just the right size for me because I
Yeah.
can't overpack it because I'm like, you're only going away for a week. Why do you need all
Crossover.
this stuff?
yep,
Yeah, I'm car because I got a hybrid. Also, gas is great.
Yeah.
saves
40
money.
something miles to the gallon is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty good.
Gas may be cheap-ish now, but I just remember back in
Oh,
the 2000, late 2000s and early 2010s. I mean, three something a gallon. I mean, if anybody from California is watching, they're like, $3. It's not expensive. But in Virginia, yeah, we got up to threes, and we got the
Yeah.
high threes at one point too. That was the worst. That was the worst.
Yeah.
All right, last one, and it is also car related. Would you rather be the passenger or the driver if you're going somewhere? Let's say like a pretty far distance, maybe like an hour.
An hour?
A
You
far
think that's a
distance?
far distance?
Far, like, I would say that's far in theory, but like if it's 10 minutes, doesn't matter who's driving, right? But like
Oh, no,
if
it does.
if let's say okay, fine, open it up then.
You want to go first?
Yeah. So on a longer distance, I'm a little torn. I think you have more aux privileges as the driver.
True.
And so for the privilege of aux, I think it's a little safer to say that you can secure those privileges as the driver. But I also can be a little pushy sometimes about the aux, and so I'll take the passenger seat if I can easily grab aux without a question, and if I can't, then I'll bring my headphones.
For everybody don't know, aux is auxiliary cable, which is
The music.
where you plug the music
For the-
into. But I don't think cars be having aux ports like that now.
Yeah.
Still.
It depends.
Mine's a
Most of them
USB,
are
but like,
Apple or
Bluetooth.
yeah.
Apple or Android.
For the music
Bluetooth.
purposes of being able to choose what to listen to, 80 to 20, I will probably still choose being the passenger.
Okay, so if I'm driving somewhere a long distance, I'll go by myself. Like, I obviously don't mind being the driver.
So you driving or Elon Musk self-driving car?
No, even then, no, absolutely not. But like, if I can be the passenger and not have to chat, that'd be perfect. Because I'm reading. I'm just reading in the car, quietly as I'm driving, like seeing the world go by. That's my ideal. But yeah, I hate being the driver with disgruntled passengers. 'Cause I'm like, I will leave you and I will laugh.
I will turn this car around.
I have threatened that multiple times.
I just
yeah.
have 4 words for this question. For this, scenario.
Yes.
I'm alive. I drive.
All right.
That's
Fair
it.
enough.
I'm
Good to
I'm
know.
a useless passenger for longer than like 20 minutes. I will fall asleep. I will be on my phone and tune you out completely. I'm the worst.
That's what I'm saying.
I gotta drive. And I'm usually the safest driver out of the group of friends. Never got a speeding ticket.
Good.
Never.
Well,
I got into one accident, but it wasn't
Oops.
anything
Ah.
major. And that was it was over a decade ago. I mean, my driving record is spotless.
Very good.
Spotless.
Very good.
Spotless.
all right then.
So that's going to be it for today. Thank you all so much for joining us. Follow us at Moton Museum on all the social medias to stay up to date with what's happening at Moton. Usually, I would say join us next week, same time, same place. But if you stay tuned to our social media, you'll be able to see exactly when the audio podcast is coming back out. Thanks for tuning in. Kanan, Leah, and Irene signing off.
All right,
See
guys,
y'all
thanks for
soon.
listening.
Bye.
See ya.